My grandfather had 5 sons. My father, the eldest, was always the one with the most responsibility, but I was the first grandson, an honor that made me special in my grandfather's eyes. While the others climbed corporate ladders and ran businesses, I was the one who spent hours with him in the woods, learning the value of hard work, self-reliance, and the quiet peace of the mountains. To him, I was more than just family. I was his confidant, his student, and his friend. After my grandmother passed away, my grandfather, now a widower, aging and yearning for a simpler life, retired. He sold the house, got rid of most of their possessions, and bought a sprawling piece of land deep in the mountains. Born in the rural countryside, he never really fit in with city life. He was a hillbilly, proud of it. He had a passion for gardening, hunting, fishing, and the freedom of living off the land. And I, the oldest grandchild, was the only one who truly understood his way of life. I shared those passions, the wild solitude, and the primal satisfaction of self-reliance. We spent years together. He taught me how to survive, how to make a life from nothing. I worked for my father's business, but was increasingly drawn to the stock market, investing in high-dividend stocks to build my own portfolio. But every weekend, I escaped to the mountains, where my grandfather's log cabin, built by his own hands, stood as a monument to his life. Then one day, I made the decision to buy land next to his. My grandfather had built a cabin using only the simplest tools, heating with wood and cooking over a fire. It was rough, but it was his. He'd lived like this for years. I added my own modern touches, solar panels, a metal insulated roof, but I kept the spirit of the place alive. He was impressed, and we worked side by side, installing a solar system, digging trenches to lay pipes. I might have bent the truth when it came to the roof's cost, but he didn't mind. It was an investment in the future, he said, and he trusted me completely. His sons, they never came around much. They had families, businesses, and obligations. Once a year they'd visit, but I always sensed their distance. Their lives were worlds apart from the life my grandfather and I had built. And though they were successful, they didn't seem to understand the life my grandfather had chosen. I did. I was the one who stayed. I was the one who never left. Then, one day, my grandfather passed away. The whole family gathered for the funeral, as expected. There were tears, yes, but there was something else, a tension in the air, an undercurrent of unease that I couldn't shake. We shared stories about the old days with him and Grandma, remembering the quiet moments we'd shared. But then, as the funeral ended, something unexpected happened. One of my uncles, his face twisted with suspicion, asked in a low voice, "What happened to the bag of gold coins your grandfather had?" I was stunned. I had no idea what he was talking about. The family lawyer soon contacted us for the reading of the will. I wasn't expecting anything extraordinary. After all, we had always been close, and I'd spent so many years with him. But what I learned in that room shattered everything I thought I knew about my grandfather. I inherited the land, the cabin, and whatever assets my grandfather had left. And yet, there was something off, something dark. I soon discovered my grandfather had been living on a pension and Social Security for over 20 years, but he had spent next to nothing, far less than he received. What I hadn't known was that he'd been investing, building wealth quietly and steadily. In fact, he had set up a high-growth securities plan through his bank. The shocking truth? My grandfather had left me nearly $5 million, along with over 100 acres of land that had appreciated wildly in value. And the gold coins my uncle had asked about? I found them, in a dusty bag tucked away in my grandfather's old desk. I handed them over to my uncles and my dad, expecting that would be the end of it. But that's when the storm hit. My uncles, their eyes clouded with greed, began accusing me of hiding more coins. "Where are the rest?" they demanded. They wanted me to sell the land to make up for the missing coins, as if my grandfather's legacy was nothing but a treasure chest for them to pillage. They raged at me, their anger a seething, toxic wave. And my cousins, Those other grandkids who had never cared to spend time with my grandfather, who had turned their backs on him when he needed them most, now suddenly wanted a piece of what they thought was rightfully theirs. To them, he was just some old man living in the mountains. But to me, he was everything. He taught me how to live with honor, how to survive on my own, and I wouldn't let anyone tarnish that. Was I the asshole for not splitting my inheritance with my cousins? My father was furious, his face flushed with anger as he listened to his brother suggest that I had stolen from them. The accusations were like daggers, each one striking deeper. But I knew the truth, and so did he. Then, out of nowhere, came the final twist. The lawyer contacted us again. The will had one last shocking detail. My grandfather, always the shrewd, stubborn man, had planned for this very moment. He had left instructions for a strong box, a sealed container that held not just the gold coins, but a collection of rare stock certificates my grandmother had inherited, IBM shares from the 1940s, worth a small fortune. But there was more. A letter from my grandfather that explained everything. He had wanted to test the family, to see if we would come together to celebrate his life, or if greed would drive us apart. Those who fought for material wealth, he declared, would receive nothing. He wanted all his possessions liquidated, and the money put into an account to purchase more land, to expand what we had built together in the mountains. The letter burned with finality. My uncles were out. Their greed had cost them everything, and I stood there, a quiet victor, as my father's rage simmered and my cousins were left in the dust. My grandfather's last wish had come true. He had outsmarted them all. Karma's a bitch. The storm had passed, and in the end, my grandfather had left behind more than money. He had left a legacy, one built on integrity, on love, and on the simple, profound understanding that the most valuable things in life can't be bought.